People with very high expectations have very low resilience. And unfortunately, resilience matters in success. I don't know how to teach it to you except for I hope suffering happens to you. And I was fortunate that I grew up with my parents.
It begins, not in a boardroom, but behind a bulletproof podium. A leader steps onto the stage, not a CEO, but a head of state. Cameras flash. Crowds roar. Somewhere behind him, oil pumps churn billions from the earth. His signature, inked hours earlier, has just shifted the balance of power in the global market and quietly padded his own empire. This isn't business as usual. This is a new breed of billionaire. Imagine a country run like a corporation, its borders guarded like bank vaults, its natural resources leveraged like private equity, and its people sold a vision too powerful to resist. One man's ambition becomes a national agenda. One family's fortune becomes indistinguishable from the nation's wealth. We see it again and again. Palaces gleaming like corporate HQs, sovereign wealth funds doubling as personal treasuries, laws shaped not just to govern, but to profit. So we ask the question that echoes louder than any campaign speech. Is power a byproduct of wealth, or is wealth the ultimate reward of power? This isn't the story of Silicon Valley titans or Wall Street wolves. This is the untold story of political billionaires, leaders who turn statecraft into strategy and nations into personal ventures. We're not here to celebrate them. We're here to expose them, to understand the mechanics, the ambition, the influence, and the cost. Barack Obama once said, "Money is not the only answer, but it makes a difference." Today, we explore how difference becomes dominance, and what it means when the richest people in the world don't just lead markets, they rule countries. It all begins with vision, not just for a term in office, but for a national transformation. Some of these leaders didn't just lead governments, they ran countries like companies.
Whoever governs Singapore must have that iron in him, or give it up. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine. I've spent a whole lifetime building this. And as long as I'm in charge, nobody's going to knock it down.
Take Lee Kuan Yew, for example. When he inherited Singapore, it was nothing but a swampy, resource-starved island. No oil, no military, no real future on paper. But Lee had a vision to transform Singapore into a global hub. Not through emotion or luck, but with a corporate strategy built on foreign investment, education, and state-linked enterprises. He operated like a CEO, building institutions that fueled long-term prosperity and in turn elevated those connected to the state's core. He didn't just rule, he architected a system. This echoes Plato's idea of the philosopher king, the wisest among us should lead. But here, wisdom came with a sharp eye for capital flows and trade policy. Still, a vision is useless if people won't follow. That's where ideology becomes a weapon. Political billionaires are masters of narrative, crafting messages that don't just sell policy, but create loyalty. They know how to ignite hope, fear, or pride and channel it toward economic control. They understand what Eric Hoffer wrote in The True Believer. Mass movements aren't built on logic, they're built on emotion. So, these leaders frame their billion-dollar infrastructure projects not as elite cash grabs, but as symbols of national pride. Pipelines become patriotic, trade deals become liberation, and personal wealth accumulation? Well, that becomes invisible or even admirable. It's psychological judo. If the people believe it's for them, it rarely gets questioned. Political psychology studies confirm it. People are more likely to support policies that disproportionately benefit the elite if those policies are wrapped in flags, slogans, or dreams. Stalin once said, "Ideas are more powerful than guns. We would not let our enemies have guns. Why should we let them have ideas?" It's chilling, but it explains why narrative control is often more valuable than any oil field. But nothing drives billionaire-level power like direct resource control. This is the endgame. In many countries, especially those rich in natural assets like oil, gas, or rare minerals, state leaders didn't just regulate industries, they owned them, either outright or through proxies. The result? Entire national economies flowed through the hands of a chosen few. After the fall of the Soviet Union, a wave of privatization handed over oil companies, mines, and banks to politically connected insiders. Some of these oligarchs were figureheads. Others were front men for those in power. The same playbook is visible in certain Middle Eastern monarchies, where trillion-dollar sovereign wealth funds are controlled like family estates. In these systems, public wealth becomes personal capital, and the line between the national treasury and private fortune is so blurred, it disappears. Acemoglu and Robinson, in Why Nations Fail, call this extractive institutions, where a tiny elite extracts wealth from the masses while securing their hold on power. It's not capitalism. It's not socialism. It's a monopoly game where the banker never leaves the table. So what can we learn from this convergence of leadership and limitless wealth? That vision matters, but only if it's actionable. That control of narrative can be more profitable than control of resources. And that, in the world of political billionaires, every policy is a move on a billion-dollar chessboard. Here's where the curtain starts to lift, and we begin to see the real mechanics behind political fortunes. Because while tech billionaires create platforms and products, political billionaires create policies. They don't adapt to markets. They shape them. They redesign the playing field while sitting in the referee's chair. In this world, legislation isn't about reform or public service. It's a lever, and it moves money faster than any invention ever could. Across dozens of nations, we've seen the same pattern play out. Leaders pushing massive privatization programs under the banner of economic reform. Regulatory loopholes appeared like magic, timed perfectly to benefit family-owned firms or childhood friends. Laws were passed to allow exclusive licenses, and state contracts flowed like rivers, always downhill to a trusted few. This isn't speculation. Reports from Transparency International and the World Bank read like thrillers, filled with evidence of state capture, where policy becomes the personal toolkit of the powerful. And yet, this was all foreseen centuries ago. Even Adam Smith, the father of free markets, warned us. Monopolies and collusion between state and capital would always threaten real prosperity. He dreamed of liberty, but feared exactly this: a state serving the few while pretending to serve the many. But for some, even policy manipulation isn't enough. They want direct control, and they take it. Enter the era of state-owned enterprises, sovereign wealth funds, and strategic monopolies. On paper, these exist for national development. In practice, they become pipelines of private enrichment, flowing quietly from the state budget to the pockets of the elite. Sovereign wealth funds, supposedly the people's rainy day savings, are managed by appointees who answer not to Parliament, but to a single figurehead. Profits disappear in shell companies. Procurement contracts are inflated. Board seats go to cousins, classmates, or quiet enablers. And all of this happens behind a wall of bureaucracy, where audits die in filing cabinets. In The Dictator's Handbook, Bruce Bueno de Mesquita breaks it down. Survival in politics isn't about popularity, it's about rewarding the loyal few. And the best way to reward them, let them drink straight from the state's own tap. Still, even wealth pipelines need networks. No one builds a trillion-dollar fortune alone. Behind every powerful leader is a web of influence, spun with favors, loyalty, and silent debts. In this world, family ties matter more than qualifications. Childhood friendships become billion-dollar partnerships. Boardrooms are filled not by merit, but by trust. This is the realm of crony capitalism, where the system looks competitive from the outside, but is stitched together with invisible strings. Entire academic fields have studied this phenomenon. Kleptocracy is not just theft, it's systematized enrichment, reinforced by patronage systems so deep, even foreign investors tiptoe around them. Every appointment, every contract, every handshake carries a price. A favor now, loyalty later. And if you're outside the circle, you're out of luck. There's an old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. In this world, it's more than a saying, it's the blueprint. Because when policy is personal, when businesses are extensions of the palace, and when friends become financiers, wealth is no longer earned, it's assigned. At the summit of political and economic power, conventional ambition doesn't cut it. What separates the world's political billionaires isn't just wealth, it's mindset. Cold, calculating, and dangerously adaptable. Their game is survival, their currency is controlled, and their moves are rooted not in ethics, but in ruthless pragmatism. In politics, ideals bend, strategy rules. It's the Machiavellian playbook, word for word. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. These leaders thrive in chaos, shifting alliances, rewriting rules, and when necessary, burning bridges. As Otto von Bismarck put it, politics is the art of the possible. They master the art and then rewrite what's possible. But their eyes are never just on today's headlines. These aren't one-term opportunists, they're architects of dynasties. Their true ambition lies not in personal luxury, but in lasting legacy. Family names that echo through parliaments, boardrooms, and ballot boxes for generations. Entire economic empires passed down like crowns, fortified by legal armor and public loyalty. This isn't new. The ascent of money shows us that history is a parade of dynasties where wealth and rule marched hand in hand. Political billionaires don't just want power now. They want immortality through influence. And behind it all, calculated risk. These figures don't flinch. They gamble with economies, reputations, and sometimes entire nations. But only when the odds are rigged in their favor. Where others see danger, they see leverage. Every empire casts a shadow. Behind the towering wealth of political billionaires lies a trail of broken systems, silenced institutions, and rising public resentment. This isn't just about success. It's about corruption, concentration, and cost. Because when power and money merge unchecked, the result is often kleptocracy. Governments ruled not by law, but by loot. Thanks to bombshell investigations like the Panama Papers and Pandora Papers, we now know the truth. Offshore accounts, shell companies, secret trusts used by political elites to hide billions, evade accountability, and siphon public wealth into private vaults. The International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, ICIJ, has shown us just how global this network is. It's not just theft, it's systemized betrayal. Oliver Bullough called it Moneyland, a hidden world where the corrupt don't just survive, they thrive. But the real damage isn't just financial, it's institutional. The rule of law, once a shield for citizens, becomes a tool for the powerful. Checks and balances dissolve, courts bend, parliaments rubber stamp. What Montesquieu feared in the spirit of the laws comes true. Power, concentrated in one place, becomes tyranny. Democracy becomes theatre, and the audience is forced to clap. As Lord Acton warned, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In the world of political billionaires, corruption isn't a glitch, it's the operating system. And then comes the price we all see: inequality. Grand palaces rise beside slums. Private jets fly over hunger protests. As a leader's wealth grows, so does the rage of the people left behind. Reports from Oxfam are unrelenting. The gap between the ruling few and the struggling many is widening. Public trust collapses, unrest brews, and the system that once promised opportunity begins to rot from the top down. In the end, the stories of political billionaires are more than headlines. They're masterclasses in vision, influence, and power. But they're also cautionary tales, etched with ethical compromises and institutional decay. So, what can we learn without losing our conscience? First, vision matters. Whether you're building a nation or launching a startup, clarity of purpose and strategic execution are non-negotiable. These leaders didn't stumble into fortune, they architected it. They saw decades ahead, moved pieces like a grandmaster, and treated their country like a high-stakes enterprise. Lesson 1: dream bold, plan ruthless, but build with integrity. Second, they mastered influence. Not just the kind found on podiums or in headlines, but in quiet rooms and power circles. Networks, formal and informal, became their currency. They understood the art of alliance, the power of proximity, and the leverage of loyalty. For anyone aspiring to scale, relationships are rocket fuel. Use them wisely. Third, understand power dynamics. In this world, policy is profit. Regulations are opportunities. The real titans don't just respond to the market, they shape it. And while most of us don't sit in presidential palaces, we can still learn this. Politics and economics are not separate games. Learn the landscape. Know who writes the rules and why. But perhaps most important of all, look in the ethical mirror. Because while the tactics of political billionaires are undeniably effective, the question remains, at what cost? The erosion of democracy, the betrayal of public trust, the deepening of inequality, these are not side effects. There are consequences. As we chase impact and success, we must ask ourselves, are we building empires or legacies worth respecting? As Martin Luther King Jr. so powerfully said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The challenge now is to lead with ambition, but anchored in purpose. Because true wealth isn't just what you accumulate, it's what you enable, what you protect, and what you leave behind. Political billionaires are a paradox, masters of strategy, vision, and influence, yet often surrounded by shadows of corruption, inequality, and systemic decay. Their rise reveals the sheer power of vision, execution, and networked control, but also the fragile cost of unchecked ambition. These are not just stories of wealth. They are reflections of how one person's choices can shape entire nations, tilt economies, and alter the course of history. The real lesson isn't just how they got rich. It's what they did with that power. So as you build your own path, in business, leadership, or life, ask yourself not just how high you want to rise, but what values will rise with you. Because the greatest legacy isn't fortune. It's what your power protects, uplifts, and leaves behind.